When European sailors reached the New World, they soon came across the native peoples there. And these people had no idea of a Europe existing, let alone any idea of how to speak to a person from there. But as you'll know, contact was made, and in many cases, complicated arrangements were negotiated between Europeans and natives. But given that there were no interpreters when Europeans first arrived, this raises a question. How did they communicate? How did European explorers talk to natives? So, generally speaking, when a culture makes contact with another, there's normally people along the way who can be used as interpreters. When colonizing Africa, Europeans would often bring Arabic-speaking peoples with them to translate. This was because sea trade had linked North Africa with the South for centuries, and in the larger kingdoms there would be people at ports who could speak Arabic. However, with the Atlantic Ocean and those living on the other side of it, there was none of that. So how did, say, Christopher Columbus communicate with the natives he met on Hispaniola when he arrived there in 1492? Well, for this, they used the only correct form of communication. They used signs. Now, this was mostly sign language, like pointing to things and saying its name or acting something out and then saying the word for it. But they would also make crude drawings as things became more complicated. This covered most of the basics, like food, shelter, Jesus, gold, and boats, but any complicated discussions would require a full translator. And since it would be pretty difficult to ask a native using a sign if they'd like to get on the ship and head back to Spain over an ocean for an immersive crash course in Spanish so you can act as a translator in the future for us, they settled for another option: kidnap. Unfortunately for Columbus and the natives he'd taken, they didn't survive very long because disease. So how did this change long term? Well, after this, the Spanish would capture natives and they'd keep them in the region to learn the language so there was less dying. Another way was that some Spanish ships became shipwrecked, and those who survived would be taken as slaves by the natives and would soon learn their languages and could act as interpreters on behalf of the Native American rulers. And once Spaniards and natives knew one or two languages, the rest was fairly simple, since it simply meant stringing translators together to communicate. And it was after this short period that communication just became the same as it was anywhere else in the world.